Ready? Okay. Let's bring the preliminary budget meeting back to order, please. I thank everybody for indulging me for not being entirely prepared to get all the way through the budget yesterday, but I was able to read through the grants to groups, and so I'm certainly prepared to have a discussion if we need to go there. So I think we were with staff. It's just starting on top tab 5. So we'll turn it back over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So where we ended off yesterday, we started to look at the grants to groups. We went through the community organizations, and I think we managed to get through those. Now we're just going to look at the 3 remaining pieces, which are the grants to the library, museum, and the theater. With the library,
Excuse me, Trevor. I'm just gonna declare conflicts for the library. My wife's employed by the board.
Does that leave us with quorum? Do we have John online? Okay, good. Thanks, John.
Okay. So just a high level, the library has increased its ask from the prior year by around $14,000. I'll just open it up to any questions you might have.
I don't have any questions when I looked at this and looked at the increase in wages and, compared it to our increase in wages and the work that we've been doing there. I mean, I think most of this is 14,000 is caught up in a reasonable, in a reasonable manner. So I'm comfortable with that increase that they've asked for. It's starting to get pretty big though, the entire budget for the library is $417,000. It's starting to get pretty big. Though they provide a very good report, laid out very well, good annual report, good reporting with respect to the different services they give. So yeah, I like their proposals. That me. Anybody else? Question, Councilor?
So within their report, they indicate that they are never going to know when comparing their financial statements to our cutoff dates, they're never going to know whether they're at a surplus at that time until their financial statements come in. So we're always going to be a year late. So how, as an organization, are we going to keep track of that? Not to say that they aren't, but just that transparency. So if in 2022 they had a surplus of $5,000, we're not going to know that until the end of 2023. So because according to what they've signed, if there's any surplus, then it goes back into operating, right? So how are we going to track that when there's such a delay?
So I would say that there's more than one option available. We can do it in various ways. And hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn, but I think the answer is going to be driven out of our policy that we're still working on, was the government transfers policy, where we look at how we need or want the reporting from these organizations to occur. But there's ways around it. Or at least ways to address it. And whether it's that delay and accepting that delay and then making adjustments based on it, or another method.
Another method may be allowing them to create an operational reserve that then gets used the following year. So you skip a year. So if they're profiting $5,000 2022, they wouldn't get to use it 2023, but we would know about it in 2024, because that's when we see the 2022 financials. And so there was potential, if they've had it in a reserve, they could use it for the 2024 year if we accept it. If our policy accepted that. delay.
I think the ultimate goal that we were trying to get to is to ask for what you need, right? And then if you don't use it all, then it needs to come back to the taxpayers, right? So that's what my only concern with this.
Like in a refund at the end of the year, is that
Mm-hmm.
right?
And maybe we'll change that through our new policy, but that's the application that they sign, right? That's what it says. So I think that, all the groups should be held accountable to that. And I'm not saying that they're not. I'm just wondering how we are going to track when they're basing it on their financial statement, which is a year later.
Yeah.
That's all. So if you have an idea and you're going to be in charge of tracking all that, I'm good to let them.
Okay, anybody else from the library? Okay,
All
that
right.
was, oh, is there a question? Oh, John, sorry, didn't see you there.
Hey, that's okay. Not a question, just a comment. I mean, when we receive these budgets from the nonprofits, it's really just a guess, and most times it's based on the previous year, and I think they've done a pretty good job of getting it close. So even if we don't have the exact figures, even if our timing is a little bit off, I have faith that the budgets we receive are going to be as close as they possibly can at the time that we receive them. So.
Okay, thanks.
All right, the next area we're going to look at is the museum, the Historical Society. And at a high level, they've made requests both for operating and capital expenditures. Their operating expenses have increased from 2023 by $30,000. And they do have a request for capital expenditures of around $53,000 this year. You'll also notice on the summary page that there's a small amount saying transfer from reserve account. That's the final amount related to the building addition. It just didn't get or released in 2023, so it's been released in early this year.
Okay, I had a question with respect to the museum. I had a look at that, the $30,000 increase that they have. It seems to be mainly in wages, curated contract, and business manager expenses. When you read the text that comes with it, they increased the amount of hours that they've got, and so that all made sort of sense to me. I didn't think it was unreasonable, with respect to our costs when it comes to wages and benefits and that sort of thing. But what I was wondering about when we get down to their capital funds, and I just wonder if anybody asked the question about the contribution from carryover and where's that coming from, because it's a $60,000 surplus, I guess, that's coming from somewhere, and I just don't know their accounts well enough to understand where that's coming from. And it's because there's more than $52,000 in capital. Some of it they're paying for themselves. They're asking us to pay for the building $40,000 for a building foundation, and for fear of losing that building, are seeing significant damage to, and another $15,000 for grounds maintenance fence, that sort of thing. And I'm okay with that, but I'm just wondering about this $60,000 carryover, where that's coming from, and if they've got a significant amount of reserves that's coming from, or because I just don't know. Did anybody ask that, or can we ask that question?
I didn't ask the question, but I certainly can reach out and we'll get a response back to you.
Okay. Go ahead. Yeah, we're still on.
Yeah, so I mean, I think at some point in time, I would like to have a discussion with council along capital. Like, if we're funding capital purchases or repairs or however that looks like, then are we okay with that becoming ownership of the society that has applied and received those funds? And if in the unlikely event that the society were to dissolve, as I have read, there's no obligation for the sale of any of those assets to come back to the NRM. As I read the Society Act, it says that if it dissolves, then you sell everything, and that money has to be donated to a not-for-profit or a charitable organization in the community. So I think, at some point in time, I would like to have a discussion. It would help me to have a bit more criteria to make decisions on these capital. Some groups we will fund capital, other groups we won't fund capital. I just think that we need to kind of get some guidelines around that whole capital thing.
Yeah, and there's a few in there. There's the Rescue Society, right, is looking for a significant purchase this year as part of theirs. And there's been significant purchases in the past, so I agree. I mean, even with the museum, that's what we're talking about now. I mean, there was a significant number of purchases last year that were capital, right? Out of that, I'm trying to remember, was it $80,000, something like that? And where does that go, and what options do we have as a municipality to recover, I guess, in the event of insolvency, to recover some of that, either the equipment or the proceeds of any sales that might happen? And, are we at the mercies of the Societies Act, the way you've read it? Or do we have the ability to say, if we're gonna give money for capital, there's a contract, I guess, that gets put into place with respect to return of that. So those are all good questions, I think, and probably should be part of the policy discussion that we're going to have with respect to grants. Well, actually, we're calling it governmental transfer policy is what we're calling it. So do we have that listed already as a discussion point in that? Okay, so we'll have that discussion then as we move forward through that policy. We comfortable with that?
I am, just keeping in mind that the policy won't be ready for this decision-making, and so, yeah, it doesn't help this year, I guess.
Yeah.
In the decisions that we're faced with.
Right, is there anything we could do about that particular point? Or do we need to have policy in place before we can ask if there's any opportunity for return of?
I don't think so. I mean, the reality is, I mean, I've got it noted, we're gonna do a debrief and follow up after this, so, I mean, there's nothing stopping us, based on this discussion, as staff to go and see what options are linked, because I'm not familiar enough, honestly, with the Societies Act to be able to say what we can or can't do, or what
If
those
it limits
options are.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if council wished, I mean, part of the process, given the fact that we're not going to be able to circle back with this policy till after deliberations are done, just based on capacity and timing, council can absolutely also provide some direction during the deliberation process after we provide some information back regarding some various options, if you want to consider those at the time, right? We can, or we can have just a separate discussion about it too, in specific around capital, what those various options are.
Yeah, well, let's try to do that as part of this budget cycle. Yeah,
For sure.
if it's as simple as a contract, for the return of the fund, then that's good. If we're handcuffed somehow by the Societies Act, well, we'll know that too then.
Okay. And that'll help drive out then that policy statement when we actually, after the fact, right?
Right.
It can get incorporated into whatever that policy looks like at the
Right.
time.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and then the question about the $60,000, what are there other reserves there as well? Are there any other questions, comments about the Historical Society application? Seeing none, then I guess we will move on to the theater.
Yes, and so at a high level,
Oh, John? Sorry, Councilor Roper?
Hey, I'm gonna declare conflict and recuse myself from the conversation.
Thank you,
I have a contract with the society.
thank you.
ready? Okay.
Okay, carry on, please.
So with the theater, the request from 2023 is increased by about $4,500. That's really the only change, but I will mention as well that we've maintained a reserve account balance for the theater as well of just under $42,000. So that's part of the NRRM's accumulated surplus just designated for the theater.
Please.
So the $41,682 reserve fund is accumulated by funding that the Phoenix has received from the NRM, and has it utilized in a couple of years, or is other money deposited into that reserve fund?
That's the right idea. It's money that the NRM would have taxed on behalf of the theater, but not remitted to them.
Okay. Thanks.
And that's in our reserve.
That's part of our funds, yeah.
Okay. So is that earmarked specifically for the theater, or does it just end up in general revenue?
That's earmarked for the theater. It's a carryover that's been in place for some years now. But it's similar in process where we accumulated funds for the museum and then paid those out for that capital purchase.
Right.
It's that same idea. Where
Right.
we accumulated those funds on behalf of the organization.
Right, but where does it actually sit?
Within accumulated surplus, it's part of those, it's designated as a portion of that.
Right. So
You know,
interest would accumulate appropriately, or does it just go into the big?
My understanding is that there was a decision made that interest would not accumulate on funds that we held for the three big groups.
Right, because they didn't necessarily have to be taxed for, because they didn't need them.
I'm not sure of the reasoning behind.
Yeah. Question, Councilor Green?
So the Phoenix Theater is aware of this, and this money has been accumulated on their behalf with their permission, or is it just money that, like, yeah, so does the Phoenix know about it and agree with us holding this money on their behalf?
They do know that it exists. It's been communicated with them. And as for how they think about it, I don't know.
So, follow up?
Yeah, please.
Thanks. So technically then, if this isn't being in reserve for something that we all know about, we could take this $41,000 and lessen this year's ask, in theory. If this $40,000 is just sitting there.
In theory, that's correct, because it's in a reserve account. However, even though reserve accounts are, say, have a lesser legal hurdle than a reserve fund, they were still created at council's behest, and it would take resolution for you to change your mind and direction with those funds.
Right, so. Yeah, well, accessing it is what I'm wondering about. So what would you access it for, except to reduce the ask in any particular year?
Well, I think it's important to look at why it was established, and my understanding was it was established for capital purposes.
But may I?
Hmm.
I thought that council, not this council, but previous councils had decided, maybe I'm remembering it wrong, that we wouldn't be holding capital for the Phoenix Theater, that we wouldn't be funding capital purchases for the Phoenix Theater, that there is, like, yeah, I mean, I'm not swearing on the Bible here, I could have this wrong, but that each ticket sold has got a certain amount going to capital. Maybe we could get some information on that.
That they would hold themselves.
That, yeah, that they're holding themselves.
Okay. I can certainly do some research to see what we can come up with.
Okay. Any other questions about the theater? I don't have any, so there's just a couple of outstanding questions, I guess, for us to receive some information on before we make our final decisions on this. Okay. So are we done the first kick at the binder? Is there anything anybody would like to revisit? Can somebody remind me which meeting it was that we received the gravel report? There was two meetings, right? It was the 12th of February? So my mind is sort of still out there a little bit with respect to the gravel. So that's really the only thing that I'd like to revisit. And I do want to have another look, go back and have another look at the report that you gave. So 12th February? Thank you. Committee of the whole? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Wow.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, oh yeah, John needs to come back. How do we bring him back in? Is he just checking in once in a while? Or is somebody says, there he is, okay. Thanks, John. Okay, John's back.
The only question that I had for council was around the public consultation piece. So it's the intention to release a public survey this week based on the guidance provided by council around the draft budget, but just wanted to put the question out there to council if there was anything in particular that you wanted feedback from the public on. So the survey is pretty general in nature. It does bring in some of the numbers from the budget, but the feedback that we're looking for is around service levels, the quality of service, value for money, things like that. But it is an opportunity for council to make any specific inquiries that they may want to. So I just wanted to open that up because this would be the opportunity to put that in there before we release the survey.
Comments? Does anybody have any comments? There's nothing jumping off my head right now. I mean, but besides, are the service levels good? Is the quality? I mean, the things you talked about are, you always want to try to find those things out, right? Yeah.
Like, and I'm assuming there's room in there for just general comments and stuff, so, yeah.
Anything else? I can't either.
When
So-
would deadline be in case something jumped up? Maybe tonight or something, like when would you like it by?
We can hold off till tomorrow afternoon if that gives folks some time to think about it. Yeah, we thought we would run it till Friday the 22nd, so the Friday following the open house, and then close it at that point. So we'll have it open for 2 weeks regardless. So it's not like we need to do it this afternoon. So we can wait till tomorrow.
Okay, and you'll run it on our website and our Facebook page. That's all social media. Okay. Mr. Barry, what's next?
So next is, yeah. Thanks for the discussion. Yeah, next, as part of the process, as Jay said, the survey will go out. There's a date in the calendar for the session over at the rec center. Then we'll bring that information back to council, whatever, as part of this process, whatever we do receive, we bring back this feedback for council. In the absence of, besides, there's a little bit of homework here just to circle back with council, but based on the document as presented, Jay? Wait, what on here? A bad 80s music video. I think it's the cameras. The cameras probably wigging out maybe. So please do not adjust your set. Or was it? Yeah, so, based on the draft document as presented, with the exception of a couple of the items towards the end here, that's, that'll be, the proposed budget. So approximately, 6.2% increase over 2023 budget, from a tax levy perspective. And yeah, we'll get this information back to the timely manner for council, and then, see if there's any adjustments based on that proposed budget, in a timely manner, so it's done prior to the actual deliberation process or during the deliberation process. And then they'll most likely have a discussion specific to the capital piece with the nonprofits, and that'll help us eventually. I mean, besides this, some potential decisions during the deliberation process, it'll also help provide some guidance with the policy. Other than that, I really appreciate council taking time to review it, and I thank staff. This was all extremely, again, it's a journey each year to get this done. It's getting more refined and much better. I'm sure some can vouch for who's been on previous councils in terms of some of the fun and challenges of going through the document. And yeah, appreciate everyone's work.
So I would reiterate that. I know it's been said a couple of times over the last couple of days that that we appreciate the work that all the directors and your staff and acting directors have been doing with respect to the budget. It is pretty clear and easy to read, and yeah, but yeah, by virtue of the fact that how few questions there were, or complicated questions, anyways. It's a job well done by all of you. So thank you all very much for the work that you've done, and please pass that on to the staff that assisted you with that.
Yeah, I do want to say thank you. I think the consistent approach that's been taken by staff over the last number of years to refine this and make it better has made it better. And just on a comparative note, I talk to local corporate people often, and there's how the narrative once in a while spins around to Northern Rockies being the biggest employer in town, and usually in a critical sense people will say that. But there are employers who are saying that their costs of operating have risen 20% year over year for the last 2 years, and I'm thinking we're sitting with a 6% increase in our costing and fulfilling our obligations with our union and filling our expectation and requirements with our staff, and we're still applying full services. This is a very good budget. So that's my take on it.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Okay, motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilor Andrews, second by Councilor Gruen. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for coming in, John.